Hey folks, Corky Farminator here. Call with me if you want to follow. This is Farming Simulator 22, Silverrun, Forrest, Woody Johnson Farm Park 16.
The most unpopular aspects of the Trump agenda.
And
so what has Mike done for Georgian families?
2:30. Well, it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
A whole lot of nothing.
And I can't sleep, so I might as well.
Mike has made life more expensive for all.
As I know, if I try to lay down and go to sleep, it ain't gonna happen.
Fueling record inflation while cutting taxes for the ultra rich. You see, Mike's not a fucking trucker. He's a man who wrote his daddy's name from business
trees that we looking for here?
Who voted to hike our healthcare costs and defund rural.
So now it's
so
might be getting tired. I hope not.
All right. Lockstep with all of Trump's chaos.
Okay.
Now, it's notable there, right?
Got some trees in there, but not a whole lot.
In 2024, right? Swing state. Ossoff is running ads calling him a lackey, right? Who facilitates Trump's chaos. So you got the affordability, the ultra-rich, and Trump chaos. We're seeing that message everywhere. Again, even in states Trump carried. In Ohio, former Senator Sherrod Brown is trying to unseat Senator John Huston. A recent pair of polls show they're basically in a dead heat. Now, Brown has the benefit of this race of being a very known quantity in the state, obviously. He served as senator in that state for 3 terms, and it's shaping up to be a fairly favorable environment for Democrats, particularly as issues like inflation and data centers weigh down Republican incumbents, something that Brown highlighted in a recent ad.
He's been called the face of data centers in Ohio. Why? Because John Husted spent years aggressively recruiting data centers to the state, cutting sweetheart tax deals and fast-tracking approvals, while ordinary residents watch their electricity bills explode.
We are here with Ohio Senator John Husted. We have a lot of experience with something called data centers.
John Husted, who's he really working for?
That ad jumped out at me because it's not the only one this cycle. In fact, that's something that is popping up all across the country. It's one of those issues, it's a rare issue, that Americans are in broad bipartisan agreement on, at least for now, that they are against data centers. We've seen opposition bubbling up in all sorts of areas. Another race to watch, a pickup the Democrats have to have if they're going to take back the Senate, is, of course, North Carolina. That's where former Governor Roy Cooper is consistently pulling ahead of Trump-backed Michael Whatley. And then there's Texas. New poll out today found Democrat James Talarico up by 5 points over State Attorney General Ken Paxton. This is an interesting development, given what we know historically about Texas. First of all, Talarico has raised $30 million in the second quarter. Back in 2018, when Beto O'Rourke built this fundraising juggernaut, he brought in a total of $80 million. He came up short of unseating Senator Cruz by 2 points. But it was the best electoral performance by a Texas Democrat in a generation. He got within spitting distance. But here's the thing. Throughout that race, which was the closest Democrats have come, Beto O'Rourke only led 1 poll in September of that year, and even then it was just by 2 points. Since Paxton won the Republican primary runoff in May, Talarico has led 3 polls, Paxton has led 3, and one of them had been tied. That looks like a dead heat. Another factor working against O'Rourke was that Ted Cruz was an incumbent, as unpopular as Ted Cruz may be, was, still is. But Ken Paxton's even less popular. I mean, the polling bears this out. He's a genuinely toxic person. And while Talarico has highlighted Paxton's failings, like most of the Democratic candidates, he is also hitting the affordability issue that's being felt across the country.
Too many Texans feel like they're drowning. The cost of groceries, gas, healthcare. I'm James Talarico. In the State House, I brought both parties together to make life more affordable, capping the cost of insulin, cutting taxes for small businesses, and passing the largest property tax cut in Texas history. In the Senate, I'll take on corruption and keep fighting to lower your costs. I approve this message because it shouldn't be this hard to keep your head above water.
I got to editorialize here for a second. If you're going to be a Democrat who's going to be the first statewide Democrat to win in Texas in 30 years, that's basically the campaign you got to run, right? That's the message. So after Texas, you got 2 more states to watch. Again, it's a very wide playing board right now. Alaska has a jungle primary on August 18th. It does seem in reach for a Democratic flip because Democrat Mary Peltola, who's won statewide in Alaska before, she was the lone member of Congress, is polling just 2 points behind incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan. The other race that is going to be a big one and make a big difference is Michigan. That's where Abdul El Sayed and Haley Stevens are the last 2 Democratic candidates standing. That primary is exactly a week from today, August 4th. We're going to have special live coverage on that. Whoever wins that primary will be the Democratic candidate to take on Republican Mike Rogers. We're 98 days out. Trump is very, very unpopular. Things look close. Also maybe reachable for Democrats looking to take back a Senate majority. Something that, again, 2 years ago seemed impossible. A year ago seemed like a real stretch. And, as we've learned in politics, a whole lot can happen in the next 98 days. Usually, midterms come down to a referendum on the president's party and how voters think things are going. Right now, there are just big majorities that are very unhappy with voters. Claire McCaskill is a former Democratic senator from Missouri with experience in flipping a seat in a red state. Cornell Belcher, veteran Democratic strategist. They both join me now. Let me start with you, Cornell, just on how you sort of view the polling signals. We went through some of the individual races. You know, there's always going to be a relationship between individual races and national environment, and then you'll have sort of under and overperformers. You know, I think Ossoff right now is sort of overperforming if you look at the polling. What's your general read about where things stand right now, 98 days out?
Well, where things stand is that Democrats have an expanded playing field for the Senate. But let's level set for a minute, Chris, and you know this, and I know Senator knows this. No Democrat's going to have a cakewalk in Georgia, right? He may have a lead now, but in the end, you know, if a Democrat wins Georgia by 1 or 2 points, that's a really big deal. So look, the polls are going to shrink. But one of the things that we've been talking about time and time again, this is where Trump actually does impact it, is he's underwater in so many of these states, right? He's underwater in Ohio. He's underwater in Iowa. So, and what does that mean? What does that really mean in terms of his approval and where it meets the road for election? Is that we know the vast majority, whether you're Democrat or Republican, the vast majority of voters who disapprove of the president, they vote against the president. They vote against the president's party, and those who strongly disapprove, upwards of 70% vote against the president's party. So when you see a lot of these states coming online, there's absolutely a Trump factor in that. And when you get underneath it, he's losing support among key groups of voters that were big for Republicans in the last couple of elections. And the Fox poll right now, because he's underwater with white men, and he's underwater with non-college white voters. And look, we know those are voters that he carries by 20 plus points, and he's now underwater with. So I think it's expanding and opening up the map. But also Democrats have, to your point that you were making, it's good candidates who fit these seats, right? It's Trump, it's good candidates, and it's issues. And if you look at the issue playing field from data centers to affordability, Democrats do have an advantage on the issues.
Claire, I was thinking about that 2018 race, which was where the Democrats took the House, but Republicans made gains in the Senate, obviously, as you know. And a lot of that had to do with the sort of structural factors, right? There was this realignment happening that continued to move in certain directions, particularly among rural counties in your state of Missouri. We saw it in Montana. We saw it all over the country, right? One thing I think now is that realignment it feels like he has juiced as much juice as you can get out of it. and there's a real question now, right? Like, at a certain point, you can't run margins up in rural counties above 90%, right? You like, the realignment stuff he's gotten those voters. You kind of come back to some of the swing voters that have determined these elections before, that it seems to me opens up some space for, say, Sherrod Brown in Ohio or Josh Turek in Iowa, which were states that were looking like they had kind of moved so resolutely into that column.
Yeah, first of all, I will push back a little bit on the premise that it's not happening in rural America, because it is. I've driven through Missouri recently in very rural areas, and I remember what it felt like when I drove through those areas during election season back not too long ago, and there were Trump flags, there were Trump signs, there was just a sense that everything had gone very passionately towards Donald Trump. They're gone now, and the farmers are mad. They're mad. They've lost a market that they worked to get for decades.
Why are they mad? This is exactly what they voted for.
Rural hospitals are on life support.
You vote for him in his first administration, and he screws you over because of tariffs. Okay? Do you learn your lesson? No, you vote for him in 20 and 24. Fucking idiots.
Not to 6 states. Not to 8 states, but to 10 states.
Then they're bitching, we're going to lose our farm.
And Florida.
That's what you voted for. You voted to lose your fucking farm. Why the hell should our taxpayers go to bail your ass out?
Montana at play.
When you make the same fucking mistake, not once, not twice, but 3 fucking times.
Candidates down to 1 instead of 2.
Fuck!
Yeah, and let me just say, I totally agree with you.
All my relatives are farmers. I grew up on a farm. But you can't be making stupid mistakes like that and ask to get bailed out every fucking time. And I'm just as much against the government bailing these banks out when they go bankrupt. Let them go bankrupt. They made bad decisions. They will go bankrupt, and then the government bails them out. Bullshit.
States in play. I mean,
I'm just as much against that as the farmers.
You talked about Iowa. I want to show this Montana polling because I do think it's
You should be happy.
There's an
You don't got to work the farm no more.
And there's a Democrat who I think the Democrats want to not run because
That's what
they
you
want
voted for.
to take on the Republican. But as a sort of, again, as a kind of window where the electorate is,
He knew what he was going to do. Name one campaign speech he didn't talk about how wonderful tariffs were. Name one. Every single time. Oh, tariffs are wonderful. Man, we're going to get so much money from foreign companies. No, asshole, that's not how tariffs work.
To me, Cornell says
Foreign companies do not pay the tariffs. If you still believe that, you're a really special kind of stupid.
Yeah, and to that point that the senator was making, look, it's also seeing in the data where he ran up big scores among rural voters in the last couple elections, and Republicans have as well. If you look inside the polling right now, in rural areas, that has come down. And if you look at the suburbs and quite frankly urban areas, and the suburbs where a lot of these
and then guess what?
Rural areas and suburbs,
the government
swing area,
reimbursed some of those big not the small businesses, but the big corporations, some of those tariff money. Did they pass it on to the consumers?
20 points among independents, and so that's real collapse among the middle.
But that's more money for Trump's billionaire buddies, right?
Texas is also interesting. Really quickly,
are you getting the idea that Trump doesn't give a fuck about middle class America? He only cares about billionaires. Are you getting that message now? Are you?
That was not solidified.
He doesn't give a fuck about the middle class. Me and you. He just cares about his billionaire buddies.
Money by the DSCC. I know the senator will love this too, is they're not dumping that money for television, they're dumping it for on the ground touches and communications and grassroots and get out the vote efforts.
Claire, if you're a Democrat trying to win in a state like Iowa or Ohio, or as you were in Missouri, right, you've got to find things to separate yourself, A, from the National Party, B, that you can sort of make hay with against your opponent in the environment you're in. And that's why the Sherrod Brown Data Center ad was so interesting to me. And I'm curious just how it struck you as someone who, again, had to win elections in sort of uphill terrain, twice.
Yeah, I think the data centers are very, very important. And I think, frankly, there's a lot of signs in this cycle that remind me of 18, but in reverse, because of the Iranian war. I won in 06 because of the Iraq war. That is how I beat a sitting Republican in the United States Senate from Missouri. And we have the same issue now. And the reason it has more power this time, I think, is because people are seeing it every time they fill up their gas tank. And they know it's because Donald Trump went into a war of choice that wasn't well thought out. They know they're paying the price. So if you combine the data centers and you combine gas prices, it's a powerful, powerful message for anybody who's not a Republican.
Yeah, that's a great point about that 06 race. That really was, well, you were there, you did it, but yes, that was the Iraq was really front and center in that round. Claire McCaskill, Cornell Belcher, thank you both. That was great. Coming up, Senator Mitch McConnell is still out of the office. What does that mean for the voters of Kentucky? What it can mean for the Democratic Party and the future of the Senate? That's next.
Rough, dry eye.
People of Kentucky provide proof of your capacity to serve or resign. The Democratic governor gave that ultimatum in a letter addressed to McConnell, quote, under the assumption he is capable of reading and responding verbally and not incapacitated by means of consciousness or cognition. Bashir also repeated his message on camera today.
Damn it.
All I'm asking for, and the people of Kentucky are asking for, is transparency and honesty. That Senator McConnell still has the capacity to serve, and I hope he does. I wish him well.
He doesn't.
I hope his health is improving.
I don't.
But if he can have a
He's
17-minute
dead.
conversation with his protege,
After special
he can
election,
call in
get a
any of your
Democrat
news
in
stations
there.
for 3.
Tired of this
All
shit.
we're asking is just a little bit of proof. We have seen rampant speculation across social media and elsewhere. It could all be fully avoided, and it's all within Senator McConnell's power. But because he won't do that, the fact is that we don't know.
Bashir sent a copy of the letter to Senate Majority Leader John Thune urging him to investigate McConnell's condition. This is happening because, apart from a few Republicans in McConnell's orbit, no one, not even his constituents, has heard from McConnell since he was taken to the hospital more than 6 weeks ago. His office has released 2 photos of him, smiling next to his wife, as you see there, those 2. There's been no other communication from him and no transparency about his prognosis. Barbara Boxer is a former Democratic senator from
The
California.
Republicans, they lie.
Now, obviously,
That's
he
what's
served in the
happening.
Senate
They're
alongside,
fucking lying. He's
Mitch
dead,
McConnell.
and they're
This is
lying
a very
about it.
strange
So they don't have to
situation.
give
What
that
do you
seat
make
to a
of it?
special election. That's what the deal is.
And there's something wrong with the Senate. It's dysfunctional, that they're not figuring this out. The Constitution says we're in charge of the rules surrounding our own members. And I do want to say this. You know, I don't want people to think I'm being partisan. When Senator Feinstein was ill, and she had missed so many votes, I called her and I said, Diane, please, you've got such a wonderful record. You shouldn't stay there. I left. It's great. You can get to speak. But she was angry at me. So there's a certain thing that's happening here. Now remember, in the Senate, the median age is 65. That means half of them are less than 65 and half of them are older than 65. So this is an issue that has to be addressed. The last thing I'll say here to you is this. We get elected by the people. The people are the boss. I think Andy Bashir is showing great restraint and respect in what he's
Way
saying.
too much
And
restraint.
basically,
He needs to start
we
acting.
work for the federal
He's showing
government.
way
They
too
have
much restraint.
rules for a normal federal employee, quote unquote. I say normal, not
He needs to start
elected.
doing his fucking job. This is one reason why I'm an independent instead of being a Democrat. Because when it comes to actual effort, Democrats really suck at going out and fighting as hard as the Republicans fight. If they fought as hard for our freedom as the Republicans have fought to be fascists, and there wouldn't be any problem going on right now.
He missed 31 votes, 2025, 73 votes, and now in 2026, he's missed 27% of votes, 56 votes. So this is wrong.
You know, it's hard. You know, we talked about Tom Keene, who's a member of the House Republican incumbent who disappeared for a while, and he kept saying, "I'll let you know when I come back." And we talked about this. You said, you know, you got to be transparent. And obviously, you know, health issues can happen to anyone at any age, right? There's obviously an age component in all this, it being the Senate, but it can happen to anyone at any age. And it's no one loves to talk about what's going on with their health, particularly if they're, you know, in a rehab facility. But I mean, the general thing here that you do need some disclosure and transparency. It's weird how much that seems to have been abandoned. Like, it is, like, people do have to say what's up with what their health condition is when they are a publicly elected leader who currently does not have the capacity to represent the voters of Kentucky.
You have to tell your boss what's wrong. If you're in the private sector and you don't show up, right, day
You're
after
fired.
day after day,
You get fired.
you're
No
not
show,
gonna
no
take
call.
a photo. If you're a boss, you're going to take a photo from the husband or wife of the person you need to work. This is so obvious, and I think, you know, I was chair of the ethics committee for a long time. It's a very bipartisan place. They ought to take a look at this. Is it really ethical what's happening? I don't think it is. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think you start by looking at how most federal employees are treated and take it from there.
We should also note that in his long career, Mitch McConnell has voted against paid leave, you know, numerous times, I think dozens
Unless
of times.
he's getting the paid
Bills
leave.
that would provide paid leave for 6 weeks for everyone in the country, things like that. There is a wrinkle here that I want to get your feedback on too, because I've seen people, there's been some sort of anger directed at Bashir that he's not doing more. But
Yeah.
in terms of how this catches out in a partisan sense, Right now, you have a pretty narrow Republican majority, and one of those senators is occupying one of those positions and can't make any votes, which is not the worst thing for Democrats, which is something that Governor Beshear actually
No, but
pointed
a
out
Democrat could be in there instead, which would be a lot better.
A lot of those that are pushing this are online, and I think are under the impression that a Democrat in Kentucky might be able to win that election. It's been since 1992 that we have had a Democratic senator in Kentucky. A vacancy, not having Mitch McConnell show up, isn't necessarily a bad thing.
So there is a degree in sheer partisan terms that this does hamstring an already thin Republican majority.
Governor Beshear is being so honest. I mean, another governor might sort of dance around that, and I so appreciate it. But the people who are calling for him to do more, he's not a grandstander. He shouldn't be. He knows what the law is, and by the way, the law in Kentucky is extremely confusing, as I'm sure you know. Because the Constitution says, right, the governor appoints, but a law passed said, no, the governor doesn't appoint, and it is a Republican state. So, be careful what you wish for on either side. But the point is, it's bigger than Mitch McConnell. I know that everyone's focused here. But it's about the Senate. It's about the House. They had a woman, a congresswoman, who was in a nursing home for months. She got paid. She had dementia. I mean, this is, I'm not a comedian, but, leads itself into that direction. And when Congressman Keene came back, frankly, I thought he missed the mark. He should have apologized. He didn't apologize. And so I think the rules have to change. People aren't going to stand for it.
Well, not only do the rules have to change, the Democrats have to be hard pressed to force the Republicans to obey the rules, because the Republicans simply right now are not obeying any rules. They're not even obeying laws. Epstein Release Act, that's a law. And DOJ, the Department of Justice, is violating that law right now.
A lot of powerful, scandal-ridden figures. The member of possibly the
So the Democrats have to reach down, grab some balls, and force and hold the Republicans accountable when they don't obey the rules.
This month, Mother Jones Magazine obtained 2,000 pages of court filings and police reports related to it. Records detailing allegations of drug use by Miller, misogyny and verbal abuse, and violent behavior against multiple women, including his ex-wife, Emily Moreno. She's the daughter of Ohio Republican Senator Bernie Moreno. Last February, the documents show, Moreno took her and Miller's 2-year-old daughter to the ER with a broken collarbone. According to Mother Jones, police records show that Moreno told detectives that Miller had previously thrown hot water at her, shoved her, and held a gun to her head. Therefore, she couldn't rule out that Miller caused their daughter's fracture. A child protection specialist reviewing the case said the bruising around the fracture resembled a handprint. Moreno never filed a police report. Miller said the bruises might have come from a seatbelt. The investigation found insufficient evidence of a crime. But Moreno did tell detectives something she said her daughter told her, quote, "Daddy's house is scary." A spokesman for Miller referred Mother Jones to previous statements denying Miller has ever committed violence against women. Moreno's lawyer declined Mother Jones' request for comment. Now, Miller's represented Ohio's heavily Republican 7th district since 2023, after first holding several jobs in Donald Trump's first administration. Trump called him a great guy, supporting his campaign for Congress. But multiple sources at the time told Politico that Miller's prior romantic relationship with former Trump press secretary Stephanie Grisham, remember her, ended when he pushed her against a wall and slapped her in the face in his Washington apartment. Miller denies those allegations. But in a column for the Washington Post, Grisham wrote that she had told Donald and Melania Trump she was abused by a fellow White House staffer and they didn't act on the information. To the contrary, she wrote in this column, "Knowing what he knows, Trump has endorsed my ex's bid for Congress." Now, as Miller runs for re-election, Republican lawmakers remain largely silent about these shocking allegations of violence. Nikki McCann Ramirez is a politics reporter at Rolling Stone. We took a look at this week at how Republicans are sidestepping questions about Miller's alleged conduct, and she joined me now. I got to say, I want to be very careful about what is and isn't established here. What are allegations? Again, he denies ever being violent towards women. But just to start on the last thing I said with Stephanie Grisham part, where, just to start with, you have essentially, and she doesn't say his name, but she points the arrows at him. You have a former staffer who is on the record saying that she was abused and that she told Donald and Melania Trump about it and they did nothing and instead endorsed it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that even though these are allegations, Max Miller kind of identified himself as the person Grisham was talking about in that memoir by countersuing. And later, now in the current dispute he's in with his ex-wife, once again bringing up the claims made by Grisham and alleging that he had evidence that it had been made up. But I really want to stress, and I encourage everyone to read the Mother Jones piece, which is incredibly in-depth. These are not just allegations dating back to Grisham. The piece establishes a pattern of accusations dating back to when Miller was in high school. This is a very established figure and a very established problem that this member of Congress has had, not just in the last couple months, but over the last few years. As these allegations resurface and regain traction in the context of this race, there is now a clip circulating of fellow disgraced Congressman George Santos telling him on the floor of the House, "You're a wife beater." So again, allegedly, but in that instance, it was a bit of, the fraudster calling the kettle an abuser. But it seems like Republicans throughout the caucus have known for years that these allegations are out there and have kind of chosen to ignore them. Because now there is no active ethics committee investigation. There is no really real response from leadership about why this person has been allowed to remain a voting member of the caucus when other members have been removed for similar allegations.
I'll be right back.
I also just want to emphasize the other allegations coming from his ex-wife. First of all, this is not that it should matter either way, but this is the wife of a sitting Republican senator in the same state of Ohio, right? It's a fairly connected person. And the context of those police reports, this is not her talking to a reporter, it's not her making public. This is a private conversation she is having with the police when she is in the context of bringing her daughter with a broken collarbone to the hospital, in which she says that he pointed a gun at her head, threw her into a wall, and threw hot water on her. That, again, it doesn't mean it's true, these are allegations, but this is in a context in which this is not a person who is, attempting
Can we start
to
believing
destroy the
women?
reputation or
Really?
publicly coming out with this.
How many
This is in the
centuries
sort of
have they
most
put up
private
with
version
abuse
possible
from their
context.
husbands? Oh,
Absolutely, and especially when there's a child in the mix
judgmental.
that is at risk.
Can we start believing women now?
Response,
Can we really?
Majority
Please.
Leader Mike Johnson gave last week was incredibly instructive.
They've only had to put up
we've
with
seen
centuries
Johnson
of
in the
abuse
past
from
sort of
husbands.
deflect to questions about allegations
Abuse that
related
the
to members of
Bible
his caucus by simply
completely
saying, "Oh, I haven't heard of that."
supports.
As we were just discussing, this is something that is very well known within the Republican House caucus. Johnson essentially dismissed these reports by saying, "Oh, well, they're allegations." We've seen over the course of the last year, 2 members of the Republican House caucus be removed not via criminal convictions, but allegations of misconduct. Most recently, Tony Gonzalez, and then of course, Matt Gaetz, a very infamous case.
Yep.
I think the thing here that we need to remember is that members of Congress are not entitled to their seats. The conduct you display in your home, allegedly to your ex-wife, to your children, that is not separate from your ability to serve in Congress. If you are allegedly committing abuse at home, especially within a party that claims to value the safety of women, children, and girls, and this is a story that's hanging over your head.
Come on, that's
it's
a
not only
fucking
that you're
joke.
accountable to the voters that are going
With
to
a
cast ballots
rapist in the White
November
House
in the midterms,
leading the
you are
party, that's a
accountable to
fucking
the fellow members
absolute
of your
joke.
Congress, to your family, to the people who you have misled through your character.
I want to note, obviously, I misspoke before. It's his daughter, Emily Marino's daughter, not wife. I think I misspoke briefly. I want to just play what Mike Johnson said, because you've been reporting about the sort of sidestepping here, which I think is pretty disingenuous. Johnson was confronted with this after that sort of Plattner story, and there's been some really upsetting abuse allegations of Corey Mills, who you're going to hear about here in this clip. Just to set it up, he's a Republican in Florida. He denies those allegations. He's also faced them. But take a listen to how Johnson tries to get out of it.
These past 2 weeks, Democrats ditched Graham Platter from their ballot after sexual assault allegations two members of the conference, Max Miller and Port Mills, face domestic violence allegations. Why would you Republicans keep them in the conference, whereas Democrats are dropping some of the accused of privilege and sexual harassment?
Well, the key word there is allegation. We have a process here. The House Ethics Committee works on those things. If allegations are made, they work through a process. So I'm not in the business of commenting on investigations as they're in process, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Such a piece of
But
shit.
am I right that there's no process right now for Miller, right?
Yeah, no, as far as I can see, there is no ethics committee investigation currently taking place. And this is something we have seen Johnson do several times. When he doesn't want to make a decision about a member of his caucus who's been accused of misconduct, of fraud, of financial mismanagement, he kind of just defers to the ethics committee, which can stall investigations for a very long time.
Right. Yes, it's a really good point. It's been a useful thing for him to have in his back pocket. Nikki McCann-Ramirez, thanks for joining us. Still to come, Donald Trump's new feud.
Grainger makes it easy to find and order the products your team depends on around the clock. Because when boxes are packed, pallets are stacked, and trucks are waiting at the dock, the last thing you want is to run short on the supplies that keep your warehouse moving. Grainger is there to help make sure nothing runs out when shipments are rolling out. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We have a great group to get us started this afternoon. Joining us now, New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman, who is bylined on those reports. Maggie, of course, also co-author of the new book, Regime Change, Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. It's a deserved bestseller. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, also with us, as well as senior advisor for the Lincoln Project and Mitt Romney's chief strategist for his 2012 presidential campaign, Stuart Stevens, and former senior executive in the counterterrorism division of the FBI, and MS Now national security and intelligence analyst Christopher O'Leary. Thanks again for everyone joining us this afternoon. Maggie, I will start with you. You had some blockbuster reporting in recent days about the rush to turn this Qatari jet, this gift. The gift itself raised so many questions from so many. Gift to President Trump. He wanted it as the new Air Force One in time for the nation's birthday a few weeks back. Take us behind the scenes, please, Maggie, about some of the corners that were perhaps cut and some of the security concerns that were then raised.
So, John, there's a couple of aspects here, and my colleagues and I reported on how, look, it's been known President Trump wanted to fly this Qatari gifted jet to the U.S. that he plans to take with him when he leaves office, purportedly for his presidential library. He wanted it as a bridge option because the Boeing commissioned 2 new Air Force Ones are not going to be ready, most likely until after he leaves office. So in order to do that, they had to take the fastest routes possible on certain security aspects of this plane. You know, my colleagues and I went down the list of things that, you know, are not visible on the new Qatari jet compared to, say, the older Air Force Ones. Now, I think we need to be clear. It's possible there are things that we can't see, John, on the plane that we don't know of. But this was ready to be flown from the time that it was beginning to be worked on till it was rolled out less than a year, and in fact, quite less than a year. And so the expectation of White House officials last year in the lead up to the development of this plane was that it was only going to be able to be flown domestically or to locations abroad, but where there was no conflict zone and where there was a U.S. airbase. You know, Turkey would obviously be pushing it a bit, and there was no U.S. airbase there. He ended up flying to the U.K. for that purpose, but this is going to continue to raise all kinds of questions. And remember, as you know well, it is not just the president who's on that plane, it's his staff and journalists and Air Force members and others.
Yeah, no, there's no question. I mean, even just, you know, Maggie, you and I have been on a plane a number of times covering this president and others, and you could just see there are noticeable differences. Now, of course, we don't know everything, but you know, certainly there were enough concerns raised that he didn't take it home from that NATO summit, particularly after the Iran conflict sparked up again. So, Maggie, would you want to ask, the White House is pushing back somewhat on this. Walk us through some of their reporting, what are some of their arguments that they say, hey, this jet, everything is going as it should?
Look, they've continued to say that the plane is safe, that there is no risk to the president, that they have made sure that, I'm paraphrasing here, so forgive me, but that the modifications are going to keep the president and everybody else flying aboard this plane safe. And I wouldn't expect them to say anything other than that. And there are, as you and I both know, John, legitimate reasons why there are certain aspects of presidential security that the government's simply never going to talk about. However, this is a plane that, it's a 13, 14-year-old plane. It's not a brand new plane, as the White House has said. This was a plane that was gifted under unusual circumstances at best. It is a plane that is expected to go leave with the president when he leaves office. And hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent to upgrade it. And now it is going back in to be, as the president put it a couple of days ago, maxed out. We don't quite know what that means, but he said it's going to take about a month, as did White House officials. It's a little hard to understand what kind of security upgrades could be accomplished in that time that would be meaningful, but we will see.
But also, David, taking it offline for a month or whatever it ends up being, sort of an admission that the reporting was right, and that, of course, this plane was not ready for at least that kind of journey.
Yeah, and it's terrific work by Maggie and the reporters from the Times. Look, Air Force One is also supposed to be a command center. When the 9/11 attacks happened, George W. Bush was in Florida, but then was flying around the country. So the communication systems you have on this plane and the anti-missile defenses are critical for the security of the country, not just the president. And I'm worried this is part of a pattern where, and the piece talks about Trump's just fixation on how quickly this had to be turned around, and that the aides around the president seem to fear, and you and Maggie know this better than me, giving him blunt advice. So there's experts from the Air Force who know that it doesn't have the capabilities. There's the Secret Service concerns, and there's other policy issues we can talk about, but again, is Donald Trump, does he have people around him who stand up to him and warn him about pushing things like this and the national security implications to it? And then it's also hundreds of millions of dollars that taxpayers are spending.
Right, and Stuart, just please remind those watching just how unusual this gift is. We've never had a president accept something like this, even though he says it's on behalf of the country, but he's made clear that when he leaves office, he's taking his jet with him.
Yeah, it's just another example about how he's kind of normalized these standards. You know, the Vice President, Agnew, got kicked out of office for taking $10,000. So this president is taking a very nice jet. And you know, one of the things I think just points to the hollowness of all this rhetoric in the White House is, because it was an unfortunate incident at the White House Correspondents' Center, they tried to use that as an excuse why the White House had to be torn down, East Wing. That's sort of weird with this obsession with security. But not here. The president loves his plane, it's a very cool plane, and it's more comfortable at that than the old Air Force One, so he wants to fly it. So, you know, it just is another example of the hypocrisy of the White House and why you really can't take anything that they say at face value. And if anything happened to Donald Trump, it would be catastrophic for the country. It's risky, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible, but it's not.
So Maggie, of course, this comes as there is this new threat to the president. Iran has threatened his life before. We know President Trump keenly aware of that. That's sort of an animating factor for him at times. But that's part of the bind that he finds himself in. I wrote this week for The Atlantic. I know you have covered on this as well, that he finds himself in this situation with no good options. There was real consideration end of last week to dramatically escalate the war again. They backed off of it. Talk to us about why the president decided to do that and what could come next.
So what could come next is the big question, John, and I read your piece. We at the Times also have done several versions of it. Jonathan Swan and I reported in our book about how Trump took the country to war and just how much he believed on a gut feeling this was going to go well and it was going to go quickly. Those really were the factors. And he was fresh off of this military operation in Venezuela, whatever anybody thinks of the foreign policy issues related to it, snatching a head of a sovereign state in his pajamas in the middle of the night. It was a successful operation from the U.S. terms. And so he had huge faith in how this was going to go. It is not going that way. It has not gone quickly. We are now into month 5, or about to enter month 5, although it was supposed to be 6 to 8 weeks-ish. Munitions are low. We don't know the specific numbers, but That is just not in dispute, although the president keeps saying otherwise. There are real questions about how they are handling the casualty numbers and how honest this government is being about that, or change their computations or descriptions around it. So he leaves himself with very few options that will actually be effective, one of which would be boots on the ground, which once he does that, it's very hard to do it in a way that would be a half measure, John, because he has repeatedly made these threats against this Iranian regime that was supposed to be much more willing to talk after the Ayatollah had been killed. So far, he is fighting this very asymmetrical fight against a leadership, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, who are not only willing to wait him out, not only willing to, in some cases, kill their own citizens, but also are less convinced by his threats. They absolutely have an economy that is really struggling. That is a pressure point, but that is also one that Iranians have shown they're willing to wait out too.
And Chris, to you now, if indeed this reporting is right by the Times, Journal, other places, that the U.S. is down significantly in terms of supplies of these interceptor missiles that could be used to defend our allies in the Gulf, what does that say to you right now about military preparedness and, frankly, the leadership of Secretary Hegseth at the Pentagon?
Well, I think it's self-evident that Secretary Hegseth is out of his depth. He shouldn't be there. But it also tells you that it really limits the president's options. Now, the combat power that you have in the Gulf region, you have 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, which are 2,200 Marines each. But the battalion landing team for each of those, the combat power that would go ashore is actually only 1,200 Marines in each of those views. And then you have a pretty big combat team from the 82nd Airborne, which is about 1,000 paratroopers. That is not nearly enough to do any real damage to the Iranians. And the Iranians know that. There's something called relative combat power when you're planning to do an offensive. And so for a basic military operation, if you are assaulting, you want to have 3-to-1 combat power against the defender. If you're going against a major, well-entrenched adversary, that goes to 6-to-1 to 8-to-1. If you're going against a major urban area, that becomes 10-to-1. Now, the Iranians have 600,000 troops in their military. They have another 200,000 members in the IRGC, many of which are Quds Force members, so elite members of the Intelligence and Special Operations Community. They have another 350,000 reservists that they can call up who served previously in the Iranian military. So the calculus here is really something that the president doesn't have any options, and he's lost all his strength and leverage and legitimacy going into these talks moving forward.
And there have certainly been some Republicans and some influential voices on the right, conservative media types, who are urging him to get out, just cut and run. But quickly walk us through what that would be if the U.S. were someone to abandon this conflict and leave the status quo in place there for Iran.
A huge victory for Iran. They've defeated the world's most powerful country. They still have the nuclear material. They'll have control of the strait. They can collect millions and millions of dollars in fees. And I think Iran is going to wait this out. I think they are not going to make any major compromise until the midterm elections, roughly 3.5 months from now, because they have outmaneuvered Trump, and I think he's put himself in a really, really difficult position.
You live long enough, you realize that there are some days, there are some times when the bill comes due. You've done things in the past, perhaps ill-advised things, you kind of knew at the time weren't a good idea, and sometimes you are able to skate by for a little while. You get away with that stuff for a little while, but eventually you learn in this life that the bill comes due. We're having one of those times in the news right now. So, for example, when we as a country elected this president, he decided that he would immediately allow his top campaign donor, Elon Musk, to cut whole swaths of U.S. government capacity based on nothing but Elon Musk's own say-so and his gut feelings. So things that took decades, if not generations, to build up, some of these things, the gold standard government capacity for the whole world, President Donald Trump just said, hey, you're my top campaign donor. As far as I'm concerned, that gives you the right to sledgehammer the U.S. government to your heart's content. I don't care. You enjoy yourself. And that is how thousands of subject matter experts and forest rangers and specialist lawyers and prosecutors and scientists and it's how all these people lost their jobs and their careers in the US government. But it's also how we as a country lost things like, say, a project that had been funded that was shovel-ready, expertly planned, much needed, ready to go, a project to build fire breaks in the Superior National Forest in Minnesota. Elon Musk and Donald Trump did not care enough or were not bright enough to understand what a project like that might conceivably be for, and so they ixnayed. Even as Trump blames wildfires anywhere on Earth on people not cleaning up the forest so there would be less to burn, Trump, in his wisdom, literally stopped funding last year for the shovel-ready project to build fire breaks in the Superior National Forest in Minnesota so there would be less to burn. So it would be easier to fight any fire that did break out. He and Elon Musk stopped the funding of that project, and so now the bill has come due. The Superior National Forest in Minnesota, as we speak, is on fire. Thank you, Doge. Thank you, Donald Trump. That was the Washington Post reporters doing good work this weekend, tracing the line between those fires burning right now in Minnesota after Trump last year stopped the funding that would have made that forest less likely to burn. That is the bill coming due. Similarly, cyclospora. This time last year, NBC News reporting that Donald Trump, in his infinite wisdom, had inexplicably decided to attack and degrade the government's ability to investigate and combat foodborne illness. For 30 years, there had been a joint surveillance system involving the CDC, the FDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the EPA, and state health departments, a joint project to actively surveil for dangerous foodborne illnesses like cyclospora. Kind of an unfamiliar word, right? Cyclospora. You never really heard it much until recently. Now you hear it all the time. You never really had to know the word cyclospora to cover the national news before this year. Not because it wasn't around, it was. But it was never a crisis like this. That's in part because for the past generation, the US government had a world-class active surveillance program going out and actively looking for signs of it in the food supply, identifying it early, stopping it from spreading as food is distributed all over the country to make sure we don't have widespread outbreaks of cyclospora in the US food supply nationwide. Trump got rid of that program for cyclospora last year. Yeah, because who needs that? And now this year, we've got thousands of people sick from cyclospora in 41 states, and no sign whatsoever that the wellness influencers and anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists who now populate the federal government's health agencies have any idea of how to even monitor it, let alone stop it. Right? That is another bill that is now coming due. I mean, two of the USDA labs that play a key role in investigating cyclospora contamination are located at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center just north of Washington, D.C. Trump right now is in the process of closing down that whole facility in the midst of this massive cyclospora outbreak. He's in the midst of closing that facility, including those specialty labs, because, yeah, who needs it? I mean, the CDC under Trump has lost a quarter of its staff. Because, yeah, who needs the CDC? We can all obviously do our own research and investigate foodborne parasitic infections. We just use the TikTok or crystals, right? Or maybe building a new White House ballroom will help. The bill is coming due on this stuff. The bill is also coming due on vaccination quackery. When you put a quack anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist in charge of the part of the federal government that oversees vaccination policy, literally, RFK Jr. is someone who said COVID may have been ethnically targeted to favor Chinese people and the Jews, right? That's who you put someone like that in charge of health and human services for the United States of America. Well, guess what happens in the United States of America? The bill is now coming due, and now we've got the largest measles crisis in this country in decades. Quote, more measles cases have been reported in the United States in the last 2 years than in all the years from 2000 to 2024 combined. Children have borne the brunt of the infections, making up more than 70% of confirmed cases. More than 80 children and adolescents have been hospitalized this year for complications like pneumonia, which leaves patients gasping for air, and brain swelling, which can cause lasting damage, including blindness, deafness, and intellectual disabilities. There are no treatments for measles. Reversing course on measles nationwide would require a nationwide push to improve vaccination rates, a prospect that experts say seems unlikely under the leadership of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The bill is coming due there. The bill is also coming due for Trump's decision to put a troubled and totally inexperienced Fox News host in charge of the Department of Defense. This weekend, the Pentagon, under Pete Hegseth's leadership, posted this online. Winning! And then look at the caption they posted at the top of it. It's not an option. Winning, it's not an option. That's literally what it says. What are you doing? They eventually took it down. But you know what? The American people agree with that sentiment before they took it down. Winning does not seem to be an option here, not with these guys. In the new CBS YouGov poll, Trump overall is 22 points underwater in his overall approval rating, minus 22 in terms of whether people approve or disapprove of him. But on his handling of the Iran war in particular, he's not 22 points underwater, he's 30 points underwater. Amid that massive public disapproval of how well these guys are doing managing this inexplicable war they started with Iran, Pete Hegseth's Pentagon this weekend was caught apparently trying to conceal the number of American service members who have been killed or wounded in that war. Playing games with the numbers, like taking down off the casualty list 4 service members who were killed recently, supposedly because Trump's worthless ceasefire was technically in effect when they were killed. So that means they were killed during peacetime, I guess? They shouldn't be counted as war dead? Trump and Hegseth's Pentagon got caught for that, and for just not disclosing the number of Americans wounded in the war so far. Facing just white-hot rage from military families over those revelations, they have since started posting more numbers, so we know that even by their new and improved counting, it's over 620 Americans who have been wounded so far in Trump's inexplicable Iran war, and 18 Americans who've been killed. As the war expands into its 6th month now, and as it expands from the Persian Gulf into the Red Sea, and as of this weekend, even into the Caspian Sea, bringing in more and more countries and more casualties and more economic damage all the time. The Pentagon under Pete Hegseth, what are they working on? They say they're going to shoot up troops with testosterone. That's their plan to get around all the winning, right? Because sure, that's really the problem here. I mean, the bill is starting to come due for this stuff. Maybe if you had like a really extraordinarily capable commander-in-chief, you might be okay with somebody at the Pentagon who had no idea what he was doing. Right? But in this case, it's the pair of them. I mean, you've got Trump as commander-in-chief and then Hegseth at the Pentagon. These are the guys. Right? Playing with the U.S. military like it's a cross between G.I. Joe and beer pong. And so, yes, we are in another inexplicable and apparently inextricable Middle East war that is wildly unpopular, that appears to have no end, that appears to have no point, and that we clearly are losing. The bill comes due for bad decisions on important matters like this. The bill even comes due politically. In that same CBS poll today, the one that shows Trump minus 30 on the Iran war, it also shows him minus 30 on his handling of the economy. On his handling of inflation, he's not 30 points underwater, he's 42 points underwater. He's got 71% disapproval on his handling of inflation, as he is right now imposing new tariffs and basically restarting the Iran war, and not for nothing, shutting down energy generation projects all over the country, all of which are going to make inflation and the cost of living even worse. And so with an electorate where people say that the economy and inflation are the number one thing on their mind when it comes to casting their vote, and Trump and Republicans know that voters are just champing at the bit to throw them out, to vote against them, to vote for Democrats instead. And so what do we get from Trump today? We get Trump demanding that the U.S. Supreme Court allow him to monkey wrench the elections this fall. Trump today asked the United States Supreme Court to cast aside lower court rulings, to let him go ahead with his bizarre executive order that would, among other things, allow him to use the U.S. Post Office, the U.S. Postal Service, to block people from mailing in their ballots in this November's election. Of course, he is asking for that power, because if people were just able to vote like they normally do, he and the Republicans know what would happen.
We will begin with war. Because when a country is at war, there is no more important story, day in and day out. The one story that you know every historian will write about when looking at the year 2026 is Donald Trump's war. And in that war, historians will find everything they need to know about Donald Trump's incompetence, Donald Trump's laziness, Donald Trump's ignorance, and yes, Donald Trump's madness. What happens when a madman starts a war? As of tonight, the United States military has completed 150 days of war service under Commander-in-Chief Trump. Donald Trump's war is now 5 months old. David Sanger, a New York Times reporter specializing in foreign policy, once participated in an interview with Donald Trump in which Donald Trump said the only limit on him, the only limit, is, quote, my own morality. That's what Donald Trump said, was the only limit on him, which is to say no limit at all, because we all know just how much morality Donald Trump has. David Sanger writes this 5-month assessment of Donald Trump and his war. In recent weeks, he has seemed trapped, his presidency gradually consumed by a war he cannot find his way out of. He has discovered limits on his power that he could have scarcely imagined as he began full combat operations on February 28th, when he set out goals for a swift end to Iran's nuclear program and the overthrow of the country's government. 5 months later, those goals remain almost entirely unaccomplished. The shipping that crawled to a stop in the Strait of Hormuz, then was open for a few short weeks, is back to a trickle. He has said publicly that he knows there is no appetite for sending in ground troops. Those limits have left him deeply frustrated, his aides say, and have made him more erratic, even by Trump.
I didn't think I would get tired enough. I'm
erratic.
Almost 4 o'clock in
the
the morning.
highest possible description of Donald Trump's public utterances. He has been speaking in circles and self-contradicting language from the very first
I got a live
day
stream
of
on my
his
other
war,
channel at
and he
9 a.m.
continues to do it every
Finished out Bomber
time he
Crew,
talks about the war
Super Bowl
that he
60
started, but
campaign I've been
obviously
doing.
does not understand. The American people seem to understand Donald Trump's war much better than he does. A new CBS poll shows that a large majority of Americans believe
not a very long live
Donald
stream,
is going badly. 63% of Americans say that Donald Trump's
I didn't
war
think
is
I'd be
going
able
badly.
to. I didn't think I'd get
30%
tired.
say it's going very bad.
It's 12/22, March 1st,
That same
second
poll
year of this map.
shows that Americans want what Americans
Farming
have
Simulator
always
22,
wanted.
Silverrun Forrest,
When
Woody
an
Johnson Farm
inexplicable
Part
war
16. Thanks for
waged
watching.
by an
We'll see y'all
American
later. Y'all
president
take
is
care. Bye.
going